It's Kristen and welcome to this week's talk. So if you don't already know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so I thought that I would take a mental health issue that's relevant to women specifically each week and blog about it, share about it, educate, discuss, some solutions for you. Anytime I'm personally talking with women about what they struggle with, emotional eating comes up. And so if the women in my circle, my family, my friends, my colleagues are struggling with it, I can only imagine that there's other people, outside of my bubble that are also struggling with it. And so I want to address that one first. The purpose of B3, when I'm explaining it to people, it's a little blurry. They get the believe part because, believe, and they get the be well part because they can see that. But when I go into talking about the be free part, that's where it's always a little tricky. But once I mention, being free of emotional eating, that just completely changes the conversation. And it's like it immediately clicks with people like, oh, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like the nodding happens and they're like, ooh, that's good. That's real good. You know what I mean? Because emotional eating is such a major issue for women. January 1, 2015, I decided to give up sweets. Actually, it wasn't sugar in its entirety, but it was sweet. So I wasn't, doing the no dressing, like the dressing had sugar, you can't have it. Or I wasn't being very particular about it, but the types of sweets I'm talking about: candy, cookies, cake, ice cream, sugar out of the bag. I don't know, whatever your whatever your style is. But I basically gave it up for 11 months, and that helped me. It was hard initially, but that helped me to build the muscle up. It's been a long time. That was around 3 years ago. It's been some time since then, but that laid the foundation for me to really be free of that emotional eating behavior. And during that time, I was aware of my tendencies, when I would crave the most and why. And I was also aware of it happening around me, whether it was happening or not happening. I was very much so aware of that. And so it was a powerful, powerful experience, though I didn't continue it on in like an abstinence type way. That definitely helped me move forward in a better, freer way as far as my relationship with food. And so I want to give you guys like a few pointers. One, I feel like for us for women is to call emotional eating what it is. And it's not that I'm big on labels necessarily, but I do see some merit in calling a spade, saying that I am an emotional eater. A lot of times we'll talk about it surface level, like, oh yeah, I do that too, or that's a good idea. But when it comes to saying this is a problem for me, that's a whole nother thing. I don't feel like we're in a space where we can say I engage in this on a regular basis and it's causing me troubles. It's very under wraps. It's very much so a private type relationship, and calling it a relationship, I think, is another good way to frame it up. We all have relationships, whether we acknowledge them or not, and your relationship with food is impacting every aspect of your life. Whether you're eating in public, eating in secret, whether you're not eating or overeating, either way, your relationship is there, and it's constantly shaping the way that you look at yourself and you look at your food. And so calling it what it is number one. And then number two is figuring out why. So once you're like, okay, yep, problem for me, now it's up to you, and maybe with the help of someone else, to figure out why it is that you do it. Is it anxiety? Is it boredom? Is it loneliness? Is it depression? Is it some sort of trauma that you've been through that you haven't really processed and dealt with in a healthy way? Is it that you lost hope in a certain situation? Is it that you're stressed, you feel out of control in a certain situation? And really pinpointing what it is, because the reality is that food is never going to help that area. And though we continue trying day after day or hour after hour, whatever it may, week after week, to soothe ourselves in that way, food is never going to cure our anxiety. Food's never going to cure our depression. It's never going to make us not lonely. I mean, maybe for a moment, but it's going to come right back. It's never going to help with our stress. It's never going to not make us feel bad when we know that we're eating emotionally. You know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't eat or you can't overindulge in certain situations, but when you know that you're doing something trying to fill a void that's unfillable by anything in this world, there's a certain feeling that you get afterwards, like a helplessness or a letdown or a disappointment, I guess you could say. And so figuring out that why changes the game for how you're going to move forward and make change. But in starting to make change, the question is, are you really ready? Are you really ready to make change? And I'll give you an experience that I had. It's probably like a month ago. I have a life group that I'm a part of, and we were doing a book study called Discerning the Voice of God by Priscilla Shiver, I think is her name. And she had this little segment in her study that was saying basically that she struggled with emotional eating too. And so what she did was, you know, she was saying her prayers, Lord, we thank you for this food that we're about to receive. May it nourish and strengthen our bodies. But before she would say amen, she would say, I give you permission to stop me when I'm full. Oh my Lord, y'all. That just blew my mind, because I was like, wow, that means she's really ready to like turn it over, you know? And I haven't done that. I don't think in a genuine way where I've been like, God, I give you permission to stop me when I'm full. Usually I'm like, I'm gonna get me a last bite in before, you know what I mean? I haven't really been that sound about like, I am done. I need God's help to help me overcome this, or anybody's help for that matter. You know what I mean? And so that's where the challenge is that we can acknowledge emotional eating. We can know why, but deep in your heart, are you ready for it to be over? And if you can't say that, then let's talk about what that means and, you know, do pros and cons and kind of figure out what you're up against. But if you are ready, then there's so much freedom in just taking action on something and getting started on it instead of waiting another day, another week, another month of something that you know is not good for you. And so that question is very important though. Like, are you ready to change? If you could say a prayer or whatever practice you have, if you could say a prayer and God would remove that behavior from you, would you let him do it? And that's a deep question, y'all. I mean, that's not something I want you to just say yes and raise your hand or whatever. I really want you to think about that. Like, if it could be taken away in a second, would you be able to let your attachment to that behavior go for good? And if you could say yes to that, the next step is taking action on it. You know, I personally, my experience, and I'll just kind of share with you my personality, I tend to be all or nothing. Like, either I'm going for it or I'm done with it. And that helps me and it hurts me in different situations. But for the purpose of emotional eating, I felt it was best for me to let it go completely, let sugar go completely for a while. Now, it's been, you know, a couple of years since 2015. So I'm not like still, you know, staying away from sweets like I was. But for me, I made the decision to do away with it for 11 months, just to give myself time to go through all the months, all the seasons, all the holidays, all the ups and downs, all the menstrual cycles, because that's important too, to really see what it means to be rid of that behavior, to be rid of the tie that I had with sugar. And so I subscribe to that. I found that to be helpful. I still now will do like a fast or abstain from certain things just to kind of recharge. And I feel like every time I do that, I'm a little bit stronger when I go back to it. If I go back to it, I'm a little bit stronger in my ability to say no, because I said no for an extended period of time. Now, your personality may be more so of a moderation, a cheat meal, or I'm just going to indulge on 1 or 2 Oreos. But for me, that will be difficult. You know, if I see a whole row of Oreos and I'm only supposed to have 2, I'm gonna at least have 5. That's just how I am. I don't know. Anyway, that's for me to work out. I'm still working on me. But you just have to figure out what works best for you and take action on it. So whether that means I'm letting it go for an extended period of time, getting things in order, getting the accountability you need, getting the replacement habits that you're gonna need in order to do that. So if you just say, oh, I'm just done with sugar, I'm not gonna eat anything ever after dinner, you're probably going to be challenged in that area. I would suggest you come up with a plan B for that, and this isn't like a sprint. This is a marathon of life, of figuring out what works best for you. So you don't have to just be perfect with the diet, or if we even call it a diet, a lifestyle from the jump. But for example, for me, I switched from eating sweets at night to eating popcorn. And that's basically how I was able to so I still had something that I was doing, but it was on the way to weaning myself off of the behavior in general. And the sugar, y'all, was just taking me down physically, my skin, my teeth, my digestive system, my moods. Sugar was just really messing with me. And so in that moment, stovetop popcorn was kind of like my thing, where I was like, okay, I can do this. It's light, it's not as addictive as these other things. And then from there, I was able to really break free from the behavior altogether. So it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you and taking action on it. So I hope that, we all can, have dialogue. Feel free to comment, message me if you have questions about how I've begun to break free of emotional eating. It's definitely something that goes up and down. I don't ever feel like I'm just completely free of it, but I do feel like we can have more control over what and why we put certain things in our bodies. So happy Mental Health Awareness Week, and don't forget to believe, be free, be well. Bye.